All right. Good morning, everybody. I guess you all can hear me. Now, in the light of the last day of the Ignite, and generally a terrible spot to speak in at 8:30 on a Friday morning after the big party, and you guys are being so far away, I thought we'll start off with playing a bit of a game. We're all techies, and I'm going to Kahoot with you. So what I would like you to do is, I would like you to take out your mobile phone. Yes, this is one of the very few sessions where you can actually use your mobile phone. And then I would like you to open up your browser. And then I would like you to type in kahoot.it. Look, nothing is going to be downloaded. It's just going to show you a screen, and that screen looks very similar to what you see here up on the screen. Okay. Now, what this really ultimately allows me to do is it allows me to ask you questions, and these questions ultimately you are able to answer without screaming at me. It's a very interesting school-based application, and we utilize that actually to get a little bit of a sense of what an audience actually has done before, and we'll do a bit of a survey here. So this is how it works, and I'm just going to run an example for you. So I created a survey, and you will see on one side, this is your screen, what you will see. On the other side, you will see something like that on the screen, and it will ask you questions. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to be able to type in a game ID. Do not type in this game ID just yet. This is just showing. Once we play it, then I'll give you the right number. So you type in your game ID, which is in our instance 7748785. You enter that, and then you can give yourself a nickname. Please don't do anything rude, because it's on the screen and it's going to be taped, and my kids want to watch it too, want to see daddy. So your name would be great. And then, Jimmy, you're good. And then you will see you're joining the game. As soon as that starts, and we have all of you here, we are going to start the game. And what will happen is you will see a question, and this question is here, for example, are you all awake? And then you have on your mobile these icons, and depending on what you want to answer, yes, no, maybe, never, you can then just simply select that button, and that will give us a nice survey. Do we have that all? I know you would now have to say yes or no, but obviously that's not working. All right, so this is what we're going to do. You always have 20 seconds time, and then it will skip to the next part, and I can see that 9 people are awake. That's great. Oh. Yeah, not now. Yeah. All right, let's start this game. Okay, play it. So you all have your mobile. You all have the screen where you need to punch in your ID. All right, it's loading. Okay, ready to join? Wait a second with the number. It is 673-6360. And I'm going to wait until everybody joined. Thank you, Luke, Dan, William, Pam, Mike. Tap, 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 up to it. Excellent, look at that. I love it. Okay. Now this has a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a great way of gaining insights. And if you want to empower your organization, well, you need to let the people talk, as they like to say. This is a very good way of doing that. Great. So we've got about 103 people, 104, 5. I'll give another couple of seconds. And we will have a total of 8 questions. Each of those questions, I would like you to answer truthfully. And look, there's not going to be anything nasty in there. I just want to gain a bit of an understanding how you guys manage projects. And anybody who thinks that project management is boring, be rest assured it's not. It just is a question of how you present it, and this is actually a very good way. So, we've got enough people here. Let's start. just to get everybody warmed up, obviously, are you all awake? I thought that is very appropriate for Friday morning. Let's see how many people answer. You have 20 seconds. On the left-hand side, you can obviously see the seconds counting down, and the answers, 106, 107, 109 answers. So once all of the answers are there, it recognizes it, and it actually starts then to simply, stop the question. Okay, 113, so 83. 9 are never, I thought that is the case. All right, so we have a vast majority being awake. That's great, because now let's be a little bit more realistic and see what are your biggest business challenges at work. And I put them out and said, well, never enough time, too much administrative overhead, too many priority tasks one to do, or you may not have any challenges, which in that case would be super. Obviously, I understand that you have many more challenges in your organization, but we are focusing very much on empowering your organization to manage projects and resources. Okay. Too many priority one tasks and to-dos. Well, that's very interesting. And you can see that you are not alone. The vast majority actually has that same issue. Never enough time. I guess that it really works with too many priority one tasks, and of course too many administration areas. Okay, cool. Now let's get a little bit more into the project management world. And what I want to know from you is, well, how important are actually projects for your company? Are they business critical? Are they an evil necessity? Some of you may not even know what projects are, because it seems to be a continuous blurb of work every day. All right, look at that. Now, interesting. The vast majority of us actually believes and knows that projects are mission critical. I know most of you are working in a technical environment, and I think within an organization that is actually the most mature way of managing projects, because you have to do so many different things and implement so many different projects. I would like you to keep this in mind when we talk about project management. 3 don't do projects. Well, I hope you're not going to be disappointed by that session, because it's about project management. All right, now, what is your biggest project-related issue that you need to resolve? You may not have enough visibility. You may not know whether you have your resources. You may not have a formal process. Or you may believe that you have too much administration when it comes to projects. Okay, now it's a nice balance between all of those areas. Now, the reason why we generally put in those challenges is because, well, across the organization, irrespectively what organization you have, these are generally the main issues that we have to resolve. So, not a consistent approach. I always like to say, when I talk to executive managers and they get a profit and loss statement or a financial statement, I would say, would you bet your house on that? And funnily enough, most of the executives say, yep, absolutely, I would bet a house on my financial information. And then I give them a portfolio report of projects and I say, would you bet your house on this information? Guess how many executives put up their hand and say, yeah, I would bet my house on project management related information in my organization. Not too many. Even though we all know that projects are actually mission critical. All right, now this is the fluffy stuff. I'd like to know a little bit more about your technology right now. So who of you is using Office 365? I believe all of you, I hope. At least the vast majority. Okay, so a couple of you maybe use it, a couple of you don't, but the vast majority uses it. Now, the technology that I'm about to show you of how you can empower your people in your organization is based on Office 365. However, that doesn't mean that you can't do that in on-premises environments too. Now, who of you uses Project Online? And this is Office 365 Project Online. If you don't know what Project Online is, then just simply say maybe, or no if you know that you certainly don't use it. Okay, and yeah, the vast majority of you don't use a technology that allows you to give visibility, that allows you to reduce administration. And we saw earlier how mission critical projects are. I wonder why organizations always have that. And a lot of organizations say, well, we use Excel and we use PowerPoint. You know, it's like me saying, in order for you to use your, I don't know, to use your Exchange or your Outlook, you need to send snail mails, because yeah, that works too. Believe me, Excel is not a project management tool, and it's very hard to manage resources in Excel too. Who of you is using Power BI? And I'm sure over the last couple of days you've seen a lot about Power BI, the new way of visualizing, and I'll show you some interesting stuff today. All right, we're nearly there. One. Okay, so a vast majority actually doesn't use Power BI, which is interesting. Ultimately, the reason why we maintain information, business-related data in a system is actually to report against it. Look, software companies may want to tell you that it's super cool to use their software, but be rest assured, a business solution means we maintain information, and that means administration. So we need to make sure that we combine, obviously, most of that and make it intuitive. But it's never that much fun. However, Power BI enables you to have the data that you maintain in systems beautifully consolidated. It gives you the insight that you need to make an objective decision. We'll talk about that a bit later too. Excuse me. Flow. Do you know what Flow is, and do you use Flow, Office 365 Flow? I wonder how many people and organizations actually use it. Well, in 3 seconds we find out. 2, 1. Wow. A capability that you actually have as part of your Office 365 environment that allows you to empower your people. So Flow is not something that is currently used all that much. Well, thank you very much for taking part. It gives us a bit of a snapshot of what we are going to show you today, and hopefully you get some nice takeaways with it. What did you think about getting those kinds of surveys done during a presentation? Who liked it? Can you just put your hands up? Yeah, look, it's a really nice way. I had to do a presentation overseas in Asia, and usually I like to be very interactive with my audience. Well, in Asia, that's actually very uncommon, and they looked at me very weirdly, thinking, what is that German wanting from me? So this is a very nice way of gaining some nice surveys. I encourage you, this is a free of charge tool. Now, it doesn't belong to Microsoft, and schools generally use that. It's really nice. Okay. Let's start. So really, ultimately, we are here to see some technology in order to increase productivity. And the reason why I say that is because we need, as technical staff, whether you are consultants or whether you work in IT, we need to make sure that we don't just implement technology for the coolness. These days, especially in the cloud environment, we do have the ability to be much more innovative, and therefore the focus should always be on things like productivity and things like efficiency. Reduction of administration, I think, is ultimately one of the goals that we want to have, at least in a business environment. I don't talk so much about infrastructure. I talk about business solutions when it comes to financial solutions, project management solutions, resource management solutions, these kinds of things. And I think it's very important that we always keep in mind whatever we implement needs to have a business benefit. In our world, productivity and efficiency is actually what we need to strive towards. I thought I'd give you a bit of a terminology when of those two items. Now, your takeaway today really is about efficiency, the reduction of administration. Make sure that productivity happens. Empower your business users, and I'm sure you've noticed that in the last, 3 to 5 years since we joined the cloud, a lot of the technical work can actually be done by business users. And I hope to encourage you today to utilize a little bit of that technology that you actually have already as part of your Office 365 tenant. And lastly, as I already mentioned, I think it's important that we understand information that we manage in a centralized repository has one purpose only, and that purpose is to provide visibility so that your department head, that your senior manager, that your executive, and that you know exactly where you are at a given time. If we don't get the visibility, well, why would we want to maintain it? Then it's a chore. All right, let's become a little bit more technical. So over the next hour, I'm going to lead you through a couple of different technologies. Flow, and I'll talk a little bit about Flow, and we'll start in Flow by producing a workflow, and this workflow actually can be done by an individual business user. We utilize SharePoint or Office 365 SharePoint as a trigger. We use, of course, Outlook to receive information, approve and reject certain data, and then we will create projects based on that approval. And then lastly, I want to show you how you can report against that data, actually using a whole bunch of different ways, but the Power BI is what I'm going to focus on. So let's imagine you are in a life of a company and in a life of a project. A project starts somewhere, and generally a project starts with an idea. So we will work our way through from an ideas generation, making sure that we have proactive notification to the right people, so that these people can utilize that information to approve a business case. And that business case, once it's approved, will then find its way into Office 365 Project Online. In Project Online, we will then manage our projects, and that's not only a Gantt chart, by the way, or risks and issues and all of the other boring project management related things, but we will also be able to manage resources so that we fully understand how we map the effort that our organization needs to work on in comparison to the resources. And then we will report against all of that so that you can go to your boss and say, hey, I need more resources, for example, and your boss says, well, show it to me. Well, in that instance, you can actually show it to them. It's always a numerical game, so that's what we do right now. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to very quickly talk about Flow. I think, and we saw that the vast majority actually doesn't use Flow, and I think Flow is a business user workflow engine that is built into Office 365, has very, very beneficial areas when it comes to business effectiveness and efficiency. Also has some downsides, and I quickly like to talk about that. Now I call it the free flow. The reason why I call it free flow is, of course, in Office 365 you have different releases, and you have sort of I'm just going to call it a basic release and an enterprise release. I'm going to talk about the free version that comes as part of your Office 365. For all of your techies, you may have heard that they've just recently released Team Flows, the ability for someone to create a workflow for a particular team. Now, first of all, the big advantage is you don't have any coding. It literally is a drag and drop capability. So that means business users that are not technically smart have the ability to utilize that. And that's why it is very much business user focus. It forms part of your Office 365, of course, as we said already, and it has a lot of native integration. For all of you who have worked with integrating and workflows and integrating different solutions, you will know how difficult that can be and how unstable it can be. Flow actually gives you a lot of those natively. That's actually the big advantage in my opinion. However, there are also some, I call it the downfalls of using free flow. It is a user instance, so and you will see that I will create a flow and it will then be my flow. So if I leave the company, then, what's going to happen to that flow if I deactivate my account? So as Office 365 administrators, you need to think about those things. The Flow Center is only available, which is sort of that Office, that administration part is only available as an additional subscription. I call it can be flaky, so look, don't try to replicate a humongous workflow that you may use, where you may use Visual Studio or a custom developed tool that may not be the right application for it. And yeah, look, I call it the big boys need to have an enterprise tool. Anything very, very complex, you may want to think about alternatives, Visual Studio, SharePoint Designer maybe, things like that. All right, so let's start. First demo. So we have an Office 365 tenant, and within that Office 365 tenant, we manage everything. As we know, as soon as you have Office 365, you can add additional information. Now, the nice thing about it is when I go to customers and I say, well, Office 365 incorporates all of your capability from a business point of view. They say, no, but they are all different applications. Well, actually, it's not a different application. I consider Office 365 as one huge application, and what you can do is you can add your additional features as you require them, the additional capabilities. And that's exactly what we can do. So we have, in our Office 365 tenant, we have a capability that's called Flow. When I select Flow, I then get prompted with, well, just a simple screen that outlines all of the flows that I may have created already, or of course an empty one if I haven't created a new flow. Now, if I want to create a new flow, all I need to do is, I say, create it from a blank, or you can also create it from a template. By the way, if you utilize a template, you will see that there is a lot of help already. So as a business user, and I'm not a developer, by the way, as a business user, that is actually how I learned how to utilize Flow. It is a very nice way. If I want to say, well, I have a SharePoint list, and based on that SharePoint list, I want to notify, let's say I've got a change request, and that change request is to be approved. I can enter that, and then I can automatically notify a particular person. I know some of you say, well, but it has an alert me functionality, but we all know in SharePoint what alert me means. It is actually restricted when it comes to that. Now, in my instance, I'm actually going to create a brand new from a blank site, and really when it starts from a blank site, you can see that Flow already outlines all of the integration component that you have within Office 365. So in my instance, I have a SharePoint list, and that SharePoint list I want to utilize to create ideas. Ideally, this is a SharePoint list that I have on my intranet, and based on that intranet, I can then allow all of my users to, well, come up with ideas, great ideas. And based on those ideas, I want to notify someone who checks out this idea and then potentially approves it to become a business case. I think this is a very common scenario, at least in the organizations that we are working in. So when I do that, I select my SharePoint icon, and then Flow allows you to say, well, what is it you want to do? Would you like to have an action when a file is created, or when a new item is created, or when an existing item in a SharePoint list is modified? Now, in my instance, I just want to say, hey, when I create a new item, I want to send it to someone. And as you can see, it literally gives you a browser-based and a wizard-based capability that allows you to create that flow. Now, I'm not going to create the entire flow here. I'll go into a flow that we created earlier, but just so that you see what's going to happen. So within my Project Online environment, and we'll go into Project Online in a short while, I have the ability to create an idea. So I go into my project ideas. Maybe you have that as a link on your intranet, and it's nothing else but a very simple SharePoint online form. That online form, you just simply add a new item, and as part of this item, I can now simply add information. For example, the ideas name, I gave it a project name. So in that instance, I'm just going to call it my Ignite presentation idea. And in good old-fashioned SharePoint, you can add a description to the idea. Now you can, of course, have multi-line text in all of those areas. You may want to add a business value. This is a great business value. And the important bit here is priority. This is of high priority or low priority. And you may even have an estimated cost. And now I want to make sure that the right approver actually gets that information. So all I do is I have a people picker and I say my project approver. And with that, I'm going to type in my name. This is me, and my status is requested. And all I'm going to do is I save that, and now, yes, of course. And now my idea is created, and I have a long list of ideas, and as it usually happens, we have more ideas than we have money to implement, so we need to prioritize. The important bit here is what happens in the background now is actually a flow is triggered on. And I'm going to show you what that flow looks like so that you can maybe even replicate that. It's very simple. Even I can do that. So the list, the ideas list that I created, all I did is I gave it the URL or the location where this list is, and then I said when a new item is created, send an email to the approver of that idea. And that email should contain an approve or reject button, so that if I approve this project to become a business case, I will then automatically create a project in Project Online based on the information, with the description being migrated over, with the priority, with the estimated cost, and I can then start outlining my business case. And once that happened, once the project is created, I want to send an email to the person who created it so that they know, hey, this idea has been approved to become a business case. And if I reject it, all I want is to send an email that says, this wasn't such a great idea. And really, that is what the flow does for us. If you are unsure whether these flows are actually executed, you can look into an existing flow, and under the information you can see that, look at that, there was one that has been succeeded, there's another one that has been succeeded. So as soon as I now create my workflow, I know exactly, as soon as I create my item in the ideas list, I know exactly that this particular workflow is actually created. All right, let's have a look. So I created my project idea, my Ignite project idea, presentation idea. Let's see whether I actually did get an email. Not just yet, so it always takes a little while. Just going to do that again. I've got internet access. Okay. So this has been requested, and hopefully I will get my email very shortly. So in the meantime, the email will be created, and based on that email, I then have a button, an approve then reject button. Funnily enough, this morning when I tested it, I actually deleted the backup email, so I can't even show you that, so it better works. Okay. Well, while it does that, imagine we have now received our notification and we have approved that, and based on that approval, we have a project proposal created. The project proposal literally goes from the idea into Project Online, and I want to quickly talk about Project Online and why Project Online. I'm sure you have at least heard about it, and there is a misconception of MS Project, which is a schedule tool, is Project Online. I want to make this clear. Project Online is actually much, much more, in my personal opinion, it should be called PPM Online, because it is not only a schedule tool, it allows you to prioritize your project based on particular business goals or strategic goals. It allows you to manage all of the content in project-related artifacts, risks, issues, work breakdown structures, change requests, and you enter the information once and it automatically creates then, of course, things like status reports. So what we are trying to accomplish in Project Online is really we're trying to reduce the issue that we saw earlier. Not enough visibility in our projects, not enough resource visibility, too many priority one tasks, so competing interests. With Project Online, you have the ability to actually manage that. Now, the solution itself obviously won't do that for you. You need to map your process to that technology. But when you do that, just like an accounting system, it allows you to have a consolidated view of all of your information. And I'll show you a couple of examples. So really, there are many ways and many reasons why you should use Project Online as part of your Office 365 tenant. It produces consistency. Look, we all live in Australia. We all know the rules of Australia. We still need the police, though. It's the same with process. We all know our project management process that may be documented if we have one, but if we find a way to work around that, we will. It's just human nature, I think. So therefore, we want to ensure to introduce those processes within the solution. It will reduce administration because we don't double handle data. It means once you enter information in the system, you will never have to touch it again. We will be able to report against it, and every single level of report receiver will get the same data, trustworthy information. Of course, you have visibility of all of your projects and resources, and you have the ability of doing the right work, not just someone comes in and said, I need you to do this. Well, if that takes your focus away from the priority one project that you should be working on, you actually have the ability to visualize that and showcase that. The downfall of using Project Online, and I like to call it the downfall, is if you don't have a process, don't think a tool will resolve that. Make sure that you understand your process. Now, from a pure technical perspective, and we'll talk about that in a second, the reporting actually happens through OData. Just hands up quickly, who knows what OData is? Very few. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. And of course, not all of the data in OData is actually available in Project Online. What that means is if you need to report against data that isn't available, you need to think about different ways, and we'll talk about those concepts. Okay, let's do a bit of a demo of Project Online. So Project Online is part of your Office 365 tenant. And I hope that I have now, here is finally, my idea has come through. So this is the email, very simple, you know, a new idea was created by me. And now you can of course add links, etc. to it. In my instance, I have an approve or reject button. I'm going to approve that. And by approving that, it will give me a nice notification. Flow will give me a nice notification saying, thank you for approving my idea to become a business case. And the flow is triggered on and will now create the project in Project Online. When we do this, And I'll quickly outline that. When we do this, we can now see an overarching view of all of our projects and projects idea. So what you see here right now is Project Online. It forms part of Office 365 and it has obviously the project button. You will need some extra licenses for Project Online simply because you add additional features to it. But what it allows me to do is it allows me now to have a very quick overview of all of my projects that I manage in my organization. I can group and filter that by a whole bunch of information and I don't know about you, but I see a lot of data being maintained in Excel, and then a PMO or a particular person needs to manually consolidate data in an Excel spreadsheet that looks very similar like that. And then we provide that data to our executive managers that is probably 2 or 3 weeks out of date instead of having a real-time view. Now, if the executive asks a question and you need to drill down, it is very difficult to do. So in our instance, we can actually do that. We can say, okay, this is now grouped by my project manager, but I would like to see all of the projects that have an issue with delivery, with a schedule KPI, and very quickly do I have the ability, of course, to group and filter real-time data, just like an accounting system. And that's the key here. Now, in our instance, what we'll do is we are going to drill then into a project itself. Now, this is a project that we have created from an idea, and actually now, once that project is created, we will visualize the project process so that we ensure there is a consistent approach to all of the projects. And I can see, based on phases and stages, I can see where I am in my project management world. So initially we had a business case. From the idea, it became a business case. The business case was approved by a steering committee, by a PMO. It has been selected, it has been planned, where I looked at all of my resources, all of my work breakdown structure, the detailed information that was approved and baselined, and now we are in the execution phase. Now imagine every single project has the ability to have that consistency. Now, based on different types of projects, you may say, well, I don't need the selection, and that's perfectly fine. In the IT world, you may say, well, I need to manage my project in an agile environment. That's okay, that's no problem. As part of different types of projects, you do have the ability to manage that, because ultimately a process actually always has the same reasons: on time, on budget, to scope. It doesn't matter whether it's Prince2 or the PMI or Agile. The solution and the underlying technology need to support all of those different methodologies, and that's exactly what it does. Okay, now based on that information in my project environment, I can now, of course, look at a whole bunch of different information. This is what I refer to as the project manager's cockpit, the one-stop shop for project managers to maintain and manage all information. My initial business case, I can now always look at the business case. I can actually report against that business case and can create a PDF version of that or a Word version of that. In my instance, it actually has all of the information that I maintained once. And in this instance, because we already moved into the execution, I even locked it down because that was our initial business case. So no one can change that anymore. It allows me to have that one-stop shop, and as a project manager, I don't now have to go into MS Project, into Excel spreadsheet number 1 for costing, Excel spreadsheet number 2 for resource management, and probably some kind of PowerPoint or Word document or Excel spreadsheet to create a project status report. The whole idea is to literally manage all of this information in a centralized place for a project manager. Project Online gives you that ability, and as you can see, you can extend certain items, so managing our risks or our issues. In that instance, you will see we also have our change request, and I deliberately talk about change requests for reporting a little bit later. And of course, I can then look at my schedule. Within my schedule, you can do that online for lightweight schedules, or you can use MS Project that connects with Project Online for very complicated or complex project schedules. Oops. And you can actually manage all of the tasks or work breakdown structures in that particular project online overview. Now, there are some nice ways of ensuring, well, in our experience, schedules are actually the one big challenge for project managers, purely because they need to have the ability to, to map my tasks that say, this is the type of effort I need to do, and you need to align that to the resources, and then as you track along, you need to amend that. That can be quite time consuming depending on the complexity of the project. So what we do is we incorporate so-called compliance scores to ensure that project managers know exactly where they are within their schedule. And of course, they can then create things like the project status report. You maintain the information online, and based on that information, it will automatically produce project report. And I'll talk about those project reports in a second. In that instance, it's just an SSRS report because I want to have a paginated report that outlines my project status with some trend analysis and all of these wonderful explanations. But ultimately, what I can do is I can now save that into a PDF or into a Word document. I can give this to my executives or to my steering committee and Bob Schioranko. So that's really ultimately the reason. And lastly, what I want to show you is the resource capability, the ability for me, not just as a resource manager, but for me as a project manager, to understand exactly what team, my project team, is assigned. Look, we all work in environments where business as usual work and project work actually goes hand in hand. How many times have you worked on a project where project resources suddenly get torn away to other projects? And then as a project manager, you need to try to explain why that is. So in that instance, what it allows us to do is it allows us to have an overarching view of all of our resources, and it says, well, this is my resource team, and when I look at the capacity, meaning the amount of time that they work per week, and I compare that to the assigned work, I can have a very easy heat map that outlines over or under allocation. It's nice and simple, and let's not forget, right now all I show you is a project manager view. Imagine you can now put all of that information in a consolidated view using Power BI, and we'll do that in a second. So I know here, for example, Brad is over-allocated. He is red. Well, where is he over-allocated? I, as a project manager, can now drill down and see all of the different projects that that resource is allocated to. And based on that allocation, I can at least now have an intelligent conversation. Remember, a project tool does not do your resource management or project management. It provides you that visibility so that I can have that one view, that communication, that discussion with my resource manager saying, well, you promised me that I can have that resource, but look at that, he is allocated to all of the other projects. The flow-on effect, by the way, is any kind of report you consolidate and provide to your executives will be wrong, because right now the resources are over-allocated. So that's the way that you can utilize smartly technology to empower your organization to have that visibility. Okay, so that's Project Online in a nutshell. I can talk much more about Project Online, but I only have half an hour left, and I want to show you a couple of other things. The power of Power BI. So what we've seen so far is we've seen that with a simple SharePoint list, you can create ideas. With the usage of Flow, you have the ability then to navigate the information to the right resource so that they can approve that. Based on the approval of the idea, we then flow the information into Project Online so that we ensure projects are managed in a consistent manner. Now, and we saw from a project management perspective that we can maintain all of the information in Project Online so that we have that trust in our data. Now we need to ensure that we can consolidate the information, and the consolidation happens with Power BI. I'm going to become a little bit more technical now because Power BI allows us to retrieve data from our centralized repository. In our instance, it will actually be Project Online. So There are many reasons to use Power BI. Visibility. Ultimately, as I already mentioned, we maintain the data so that we have visible data. Data mapping, it means I can now suddenly take my project management information, and I'm sure you have that when you work in a project environment. Your finance department gives you actual cost or actual financials, and you need to drag that into your project status report so that you report against the costing as well. Well, Power BI does that actually for you. You can pull these data sets nicely together. You can utilize information that is cloud specific and on-premises specific, and actually it is end user friendly. It means I, as a business user, can create my own dashboards. Again, I'll show you that a little bit later. Well, I personally believe there are very few reasons why you wouldn't want to use Power BI. If you don't have a consistent data model, so if you have bad data, don't think that a tool allows you to magically clean that up. Bad data in ultimately means bad data out. It's great that you can produce a beautiful picture, but if that picture is not accurate, well, then it's not worth anyone's part. Power BI is an Office 365 tool, so you need to at least have the subscription for Office 365. And Power BI is an analytical tool, so it allows you to run analysis on data and information. It is not very good at paginated reports, as I like to call them. Paginated reports for me are things like a project status report or a program report, where my executive still wants to have a printed version because they want to put a little note on the side. I hope they die out eventually, but these paginated reports are actually, in all reality, still very, very prominent in lots of organizations. Well, in the first one, I couldn't really think of anything else why I wouldn't want to use Power BI. There are lots of small niggly bits and pieces, real-time data versus subscription data, etc. But we'll talk about that right now. So, Power BI. So Power BI has a couple of, Power BI has a couple of ways of retrieving and consuming data. First of all, you can use a browser. And a browser version actually looks, a little bit like that. You open up browser and you have some visibility. And I'll give you some nice examples of visibility because, believe it or not, it's not about the amount of colors that you use, and it's not about the busyness. You need to be able to focus on data so that you can make the right decision. Power BI enables you to do that if you are smart in design. You can use, of course, your iPhone, your iPad, any kind of mobile device, and if you design your own dashboard, you can either use a browser or you can use a desktop version of Power BI. We will use the desktop version of Power BI to create some of the reports. And now what I'll do is I'll show you how you can retrieve data from Project Online in a native form in OData. In order for me to show you that, I need to just explain a little bit what OData is. OData stands for Open Data File format. It's not something that Microsoft invented, by the way. This is an open file format that is used in the cloud world throughout all of the cloud applications. Now, what it I explain it in my very non-technical term is, it is essentially a web service wrapper around a SQL database so that I can retrieve information. That's how I like to explain it. I know some of your techies are laughing about that, saying, "Oh, that's not true, it also does other stuff," and I'm sure it does. But for me, it's all about data extract. So if I maintain data in a cloud environment, I don't have direct access to a database, which is a bit of a problem. So therefore, Microsoft decided to use OData for users to retrieve the information. This is how you retrieve data, OData, natively from Project Online. Oops, that's the wrong one. Sorry, just need to get the right, there we go. So, in my project environment, again, you can see that I'm in my project center. Again, with all of the projects that I have, I'm going to take this URL and I'm just going to open up an extra browser so that you can see what I do here. So in order to retrieve information utilizing OData, you need to be able to know your URL. In our instance, it's our company name plus the site, a site collection where Project Online lives on, and then I have an underscore API project data. Now when I run this, you will see it actually retrieves the information from Project Online and gives me, well, an XML file. Again, for the end user, for the business user, it's not that nice, and I'll show you in a second how easy you can actually do that for business user. I just want to showcase that for all of your techies out there so that you know how you can manipulate that data. So what I do is, all I do is I highlight and copy that information. And then I open up my Power BI. This is the desktop version of Power BI. And again, I'm sure you've seen that over the last 3 days. I'm not going to show you how to download that. You can Google that yourself, Bing that yourself. And once you have the version, you then say, well, I want to get data. And in my instance, I want to get an OData feed. When I open up that OData feed, it asks me to provide the URL. This is the URL that I entered. And based on that URL, I now say, okay, and what it does is it checks, hey, who are you? Are you allowed to get this information? Now, I did that a little bit earlier by logging on, and it says, okay, I recognize you. You're an administrator for Project Online, and these are all of the data sets that you can have. Now, check out this data set. It literally is all information regarding your resources, regarding your project schedule, your milestones, all of those data sets. It even incorporates things like assignments. So if you assign a resource to a task, you can then create a nice trend analysis. And again, I'll show you that in a second. I can report against some data in my project site, which utilizes SharePoint, by the way. Issues, risks, deliverables. However, there is a downside with OData. I said it earlier. So each individual project in Project Online has actually a project-specific website. That website is nothing else but a SharePoint team site. And when you subscribe to Project Online, it actually gives you risks and issues and deliverables as part of those lists. As soon as you amend that, and you will always amend that because it's just an out-of-the-box template. And as soon as you add information like change requests, which is nothing else but an online form, a list in SharePoint, you will not be able to report against that data natively in Project Online. There are ways around that, and I'll show you that in a second, but be aware that the data you maintain in Project Online may not all be available in an OData feed. Now, if you want to investigate exactly where that is, there are lots of blogs out there that outline that, including some on our site, and of course you can ask me, but ultimately, if you want to know what data is accessible, all you need to do is actually use that OData feed, that URL, and you will see what kind of data is available. Anything outside of that, you will not be able to report against using OData. You know, that being said, I would say it's about 85% of the data is there. So right now, I just want to report against my project-related information. As soon as I load this, excuse me, I may also want to report against baseline related information, but right now we will just keep the project data. I load this data, and what happens now is it takes the information from that OData feed and plunks it into Power BI. And I think that's where you as a consultant or as an administrator or a techie in your organization actually can amend those strings, make them a little bit more customer friendly or user friendly, and then all you do is you save this as a template, and everybody who wants to create their own dashboard just simply opens up that template and has those connection strings available already. Now in that instance, it's very simple to then of course create a project, to create a dashboard report. Program, I want to have a list of all of my programs. And this is now literally classical Power BI. And I want a list of my projects. They're called names. Project name. And let's say I want a list of my cost, just so that we have something. Project cost. And you will see that it's very simple to create those kinds of reports now. Again, it is a drag and drop capability, and everybody or anybody who has some Excel experience will be able to utilize Power BI very simply. So what I've done is I literally downloaded now a list of all of my projects. I now want to group them or filter them by my program, and I want to have an overarching cost breakdown. So here is my mass program, and I can see straight away, well, this is based on all of those kinds of projects, and I'm just going to make them a bit bigger. And right now the total cost is $800,000. So that's the type of way, that's the way that you retrieve the data. Now, by the way, you can utilize not just Power BI, but Excel as well. And what I'll do is I'm just going to show you a couple of nice reports. So here is a Power BI report that allows me to look at my program data. So again, this data comes from Project Online and does nothing else but utilizes OData feeds and Power BI. So I, as a program manager, can see straight away, hey, look at this, we have a 25% baseline. We should be on 25%, but we only have 7%. That's the type of visibility that I need. Well, then show me all of my troubled projects, and as you can see, it filters that on real time. It's not manually, it's not copying and pasting. It's the program manager in that instance that has the ability to look at that data. Now, this data can, of course, be program related, can be visual, like a Gantt chart. Now, Power BI created Gantt charts already, so it's a very nice way of representing your program. Things like your change request, and I'll come back on those change requests. Remember, I said a list. This is a custom list that is not part of Project Online that you have to create on a project site. You wouldn't be able to report against that in OData. So there are third-party tools out there that do essentially nothing else but provide you a data warehouse for Project Online and SharePoint and combine that information beautifully. That's the second part of the Power BI presentation that I want to quickly outline. So in my instance, I'm going to go back into Power BI, and what I do is I connect to a SQL server. Now we have a tool that allows us, it's an Azure-based database that does nothing else but real-time gets data from Project Online and from SharePoint project sites and put them into a reportable form or solution. So you give the SQL server and the database, and you say okay, and then it comes up with a just show you that comes up with the data that is maintained in the database. Now in that instance you will see all of the data we have in OData, of course, is available, but additionally we have things like SharePoint related data that we wouldn't be able to report against in OData. So because it is in a database, you will not only see that it's much quicker to report against, but of course the data is very nicely available. So here is, division. So if I wanted to report against the division that I don't manage in Project Online, but in SharePoint, I do have the ability to do exactly that. Just so that you've seen that, here's just a very simple list of my change requests. So I connected to the tables in my data source, and one of those tables was the change request table. And as you can see, every single field that you manage in SharePoint is actually now available in that database. You can then just simply add a new SharePoint, a new change request in a SharePoint list, and it will become available in real time. So that's how Power BI allows you not just to retrieve data using OData, but it also allows you to retrieve data using your database. This can be an on-prem or Azure-based database. Again, I just want to outline a couple of visualization examples by dragging and dropping. And again, this is not done by a technical resource. This is literally done by a business resource. Any kind of decisions that you may want to have. Again, keep the layout always consistent across all of the information. Any kind of documents that required some approval, again, ensuring that the data is available and that process are followed through. Any kind of action items that you may have on a project or program. And of course, what's very important very often are milestones. Program milestones on milestones that have been completed and milestones that will be completed next month. So it's that kind of visualization that you can accomplish with Power BI. All right. So I just want to show you a couple of other things before we head off, and I can see that my time is running out. So in conclusion, what we've seen so far is the idea creation, creating a project, managing a project in an environment that allows you to produce consistency, and then reporting against that data in Power BI. Really, thinking about the technology and thinking about that workflow process, it is about the efficiency. The reduction of administration happens by ensuring that you enter information once only. Don't double handle data. Your doctrine needs to be enter information once, make sure it's of high quality. Productivity, let your business user run those kinds of things. It shouldn't be the techie that creates the workflows, that creates the dashboards. It should be the business user who does that, especially when it comes to decision making. Make sure that the data you provide is real time and not necessarily 3 weeks or 4 weeks old. Okay. So I have one more thing to show you. It's Project Online related. We get this question a lot, and I want to quickly show you what we can do there. So Microsoft purchased some applications and incorporated them into Project Online to make reporting easier outside of Power BI, which is actually within Project Online, and they also incorporated applications so that if you want to enter your timesheet data on the go, you have now a mobile device where you can update your task and enter your timesheet. I want to quickly show you those. So one, be aware, for those of you who have Project Online, all you need to do is go to the store. It's called the Portfolio Dashboard. Doesn't cost you anything. It's part of your subscription. You download it, and I'll show you what you can do with it. Same with the so-called Time Reporter. The Time Reporter connects to your Project Online environment as a user, and I can then enter my timesheet. Again, I'll show you that in a second as well. Now, let's have a look. So what I'll do is I'll go into my Project Center, into Project Online. I have downloaded my my portfolio dashboard, and it's incorporated in your quick launch bar. And if I now if I go into my portfolio dashboard, it will open up the dashboard. Now this is a tool, and I'd like to make that clear again, this is a tool that works within Project Online. It means you don't need Power BI if you don't have Power BI right now, but you still want to provide that kind of visibility. So what the portfolio dashboard does is it allows you as a business user to create your own dashboards as well. That is dashboard related information for project schedule data, for resource data, for milestone data, for cost data, and all of those wonderful things. So I can now, for example, go and see, this is my overarching project costs. At this point in time, the vast majority of project cost actually goes into my software development, and then into my infrastructure, and then into general enterprise projects. So I have a picture straight away to see whether the investment that I want to conduct is actually appropriate. Then I can drill down into particular projects. So this here is grouped by departments, and within that department I can see certain projects, and some of them have these red KPIs. So I drill into those areas. So I don't have to drill into the project itself, but I can now very quickly determine, hey, I've got some slipping tasks, or I have some cost overruns, I have work or effort overruns, I have missed milestones, and you literally have the ability to showcase that. This is part of Project Online from a reporting point of view that happens natively. And then, of course, you can have an executive summary of this particular project, and that particular project then gives you these overarching views. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to try to show you that directly on the app as well. So what you've seen was the browser version when you download it, but when you have a view in, let me just see that I can connect, there we go. When you download the app dashboard on your iPad, you can just simply see exactly that same data. So suddenly you have the ability to provide your executive with that report on the go. Again, it's part of a Project Online. I can now go and drill into the details just like I did on the browser. I have the same data. I can drag that information over. I, as an executive, know exactly where I am with my project, with my date information, cost information, milestone information, issue information, and if I want to see what kind of issues do I have within the project, I can see a nice heat map that determines, look, there is some cost variance, there are some finish variance, and I can have that conversation. So this is the dashboard that comes as part of Project Online. There's one more I'd like to show you, which is the timesheet part, again, because I hear that all the time. So if you work for an organization that has timesheets, Project Online has actually a timesheet application as part of their offer, which is great. So what I'll do is I'm just going to connect to my iPhone, and within my iPhone I have my Time Reporter. So the Time Reporter now connects to Project Online and gives me my personal timesheet. And I can now enter information. So here is some work that I do for the US, and there are some workshops that I enter. There's some administrative time that I want to enter for this particular period. Of course, you have the ability to change that, go to my current period, and it brings me to my current or previous period. I can enter the data. I can say, well, I did 5 hours work here, 5 hours work there. And then I have the ability to send that data. When I send this data, it will now send the timesheet to my timesheet manager, who can approve it in turn. The way that we use that actually as a consulting organization, this is what we then send to our customer. So they agree to the list of tasks. I have them in my timesheet. I enter that information, and we send that out to our customer, who can approve that. Once it's approved, I can send the invoice. So that's what the additional application that is available in Project Online. This has just become available about, this one here, about I think 4 or 5 months ago, the portfolio dashboard about 6 or 7 months ago. A lot of organizations that use Project Online actually don't know about that. It becomes part of your subscription. So be aware of that. I am running just a tiny little bit over, but I do have about 5 minutes now for questions. Look, we've gone through a whole bunch of information right now, from an ideas creation to project creation to visibility using Power BI with the different capabilities of using OData or SQL data. And of course, lastly, we looked at the additional applications that come as part of Project Online, dashboard creation and timesheet. Do you have any questions? Well, I don't have Kahoot, so I can't ask you the questions there. Yes, please. Great question. So for those users who have projects, for those companies who have Project Server and want to move Project Server on-premises data into Project Online, there are several third-party products that allow you to do that. The biggest one is probably a company called Fluent Pro. Again, has its own challenges, and you have to consider, have you done some customization in Project Server? Do you want to have that customization in Project Online? So there are lots of those questions, but a good starting point is certainly Fluent Pro. That's what we even use internally to migrate data from one environment to another. Yeah. No, great question. And by the way, if you are a Primavera or a Clarity user and you want to move into Project Online, yes, it's possible, and it has been done many times before, where we take data from Clarity or Primavera and move them into Project Online as well. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for... Oh, yes, sorry? Yeah, great question. I was wondering whether that comes about. So for those people who know Dynamics and CRM, Dynamics has now has come out with PSA, that's what they call it, Project Service. It's a project management module. So the PSA in Dynamics, in CRM, is focused for consulting organizations. So it's great when you want to have that life cycle from a quote approved by customer, managing that project in PSA, producing the invoice, including timesheets, etc. That is a really nice way of doing work through Dynamics. But it is focused around professional services organizations, I would say. So if you work in an organization where prioritization of projects is important, where portfolio management and even program management is important, then PSA is probably not focused around that area. That's where Project Online is focused around. But yeah, for consulting organizations, PSA is good. Has some downfalls. It is version 1. Resource management can be improved on. I'm just going to say schedule management, even though they have a nice Gantt chart. Yeah, it's a version 1, but a very good start. All right. Any other questions? Yes, please. Great question. So the question was, what about licenses? So currently, Project Online has 3 license schemes. A portfolio manager who can have consolidated views, including that dashboard that I've shown you. You need to have the portfolio server licenses in order to do that. Then you have a project management or a professional license that entitles you to use MS Project as the desktop version and everything in Project Online browser, including, of course, the timesheet app, etc. And then you have a timesheet user, which is by far, obviously, the most cost-effective way. A timesheet user still needs to have that license available. I don't think that will go away, but it's a minimum price. I think we're talking $7 a month or something. There's no other timesheet system that actually has that kind of attractiveness. That being said, if you want to collaborate with an external company and you want to make the project site available, at this point in time, you still need to have licenses according to Microsoft. However, I hope that that will change very shortly so that you can invite external users to have access to your project-specific website without an additional license. So watch that space. Okay? Any other questions? Yes, please. Yeah. So there are tools. Well, we've actually had to develop them because we've got a couple of customers that did exactly that. Yes is the short answer. Send me an email and I'll provide you information. Any other information that you need? Any other question? Well, with that, I hope that you have a great last day of the Ignite, and thank you very much for coming. I hope it was worth your while.